So NOCHI Together is our series of community cooking classes that we launched last year when the pandemic set in and we were no longer able to host people at our downtown campus for hands-on cooking classes. So we took it online just like everybody else. And now we're able to host groups like y'all for fun experiences. I know that y'all are calling in from kind of all over the place. I'd love to hear in the chat box where you're calling in from and if you're cooking along. But yeah, for now, we're just excited to kind of help transport you back to New Orleans for a vicarious dinner. NOCHI stands for the New Orleans Culinary and Hospitality Institute. We opened about a little over 2 years ago. And we're very happy to have y'all here. If you didn't arrive before class started and see the little kind of housekeeping notes, just a little bit of background or a little bit of kind of housekeeping rules. We love to see your kitchens. We love to hear your voices. We love to see your creations. So feel free to keep your video on, turn it off, whatever you're comfy with. But also feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions throughout the class. With that being said, know that I will be here monitoring the chat box. So if you have any questions and you're shy or you don't want to interrupt or whatever, just drop them in the chat and I will pass them along to Chef Scott throughout the demo. And with that, very excited to introduce y'all to Chef Scott Mackey. He is our executive events chef. So that means he cooks all the big feasts for the weddings and parties and everything like that. And then he also graces us with his presence for these classes. So Scott is going to teach us how to make barbecue shrimp, super creamy grits, and pimento cheese. This whole menu only requires 4 sticks of butter. And just to let y'all know what the next hour together is going to be like, we're going to start off with some kind of smart multitasking. So if you feel a little overwhelmed by the pots at the beginning, don't worry, it's not going to be like that for the full hour. We're going to get some stuff going on the back burner, and then that'll set us up for success to put it all together beautifully. So hi, Scott.
Hello.
Let's get this party started. What are we doing first?
Okay, so welcome everybody to the NOCHI kitchen. Like Rami told you, we're going to be doing some barbecue shrimp and pimento cheese grits today. So the first thing we're going to do is start to make our reduction sauce for the barbecue shrimp. So when we say barbecue shrimp in New Orleans, that kind of means something completely separate from anything anybody knows about barbecue. If you lived in or are from New Orleans, then you already know, but if you're not, I'm going to walk you through it because it's something very different. So the first thing we're going to do is, like I said, make this reduction, which is later going to turn into a butter sauce for our shrimp. Okay, so we're starting with some really intensely flavored stuff. We have here Worcestershire sauce, and then there's also some dark ale in here. Whatever your favorite like full-bodied beer is, it would work fine. And then we're also using a little bit of shrimp stock, and I'll kind of explain to you why we're doing that as we go. So we have our little pot. We're going to go ahead and add all that stuff to it. And then comes the rest of it, which is all the principal flavors of barbecue shrimp, which are rosemary, straight in there, lemon. I just have a whole lemon that I just sliced up. I can go right in there. That'll actually get you more lemon flavor than just adding, say, lemon juice, although you could just use lemon juice. But because we're making a reduction, the more water that you add, the more water you're going to have to cook out of it. So if you can avoid adding a lot of water to this, try to do that. I also have some onion, just roughly chopped. Doesn't even matter if the skin is off it or anything. None of this stuff has to be pretty. It's all going to come out in the end. Okay, we're just trying to get flavor right now. We have some garlic. And then one of the most forward things in barbecue shrimp is black pepper. So we're going to be using this in a couple of different ways. We're going to put plenty of black pepper both in our reduction, and then we're also going to season our shrimp with a nice amount of black pepper too. So once we have all this stuff kind of together in the pot, we're just going to put it on the fire. Go ahead and bring that up to a boil, and you're basically just letting it boil down. When in cooking, when you say reduction, it basically means that you're reducing the volume of a liquid, but what you're really doing is removing the water. So all the flavor is going to stay behind. We're just trying to get some of that water out of there, and through the cooking process, it's going to extract all the flavors from all that other stuff that you put in there. So every butter sauce starts with a reduction. Even if it's like a basic beurre blanc like you get in a restaurant with fish, that always starts with just like white wine or white wine and lemon reduced, okay? So I'll explain more about why we do that in a little bit. The next thing we're gonna do is talk about grits. So for those of you who don't know, grits are basically dried whole kernels of corn that are ground in between two giant stones, and that's called a grist mill. So that's kind of where the name grits comes from. So you have this really coarse kind of cornmeal. Is it like cornmeal? Yes, but it's not the same thing. So when you make cornmeal or semolina, actually that certain parts of the corn, the germ of the corn, has been removed before it's ground, and it's also ground finer. So like semolina that they use in like pizza restaurants and stuff, that's a very fine grind of basically the same thing. Cornmeal is kind of in between there, and then you have grits. So when you say stone ground grits, which you might see them in the store, if you see they say stone ground, that means that they're made kind of in the traditional way. So they're going to be like a more coarse grind, and they're not going to have already been cooked. So when you buy like instant grits or quick grits, it's basically the same product, except in a factory, they've already cooked it and then dried it again. So that when you go to boil it, it cooks much, much faster. But for us, we're going to need a little bit of time. So I know what the recipe says, but the most important thing about grits is it's just a ratio. Okay, so it's a certain amount of liquid to a certain amount of grits. And what that is that for stone ground grits, it's going to be 5 parts liquid to 1 part grit. So right now I have 5 cups of liquid to my 1 cup of grits. Okay, now my liquid is some water and some milk. You don't want to cook your grits just in straight water. They're not going to look or have the right mouthfeel, and they're not really going to get the right flavor. So you have to use some dairy in here. Okay, you don't have to use straight milk. That gets kind of expensive. Maybe if you had a little heavy cream for your coffee, you can mix that with water or milk and water. Exactly what that ratio is, it doesn't really matter. I have 3 cups water to 2 cups milk. But it doesn't really matter. Like this could just be straight milk if you wanted, or any kind of combination thereof. As long as you have 5 cups of liquid to 1 cup of grits, and you at least have some kind of dairy, some kind of fat in there. Okay. So we're going to take this liquid.
Noting on the ratio front, y'all, is that if you're using, if you're using grits that aren't stone ground, as long as they're not instant, you're fine. I think that there's a lot of kind of like weird lore around, having to cook grits the perfect way, but really they're pretty forgiving. If you're using just kind of like Quaker old-fashioned grits, again, as long as they're not instant, you'll be fine. You just might end up making your ratio more like 1 part grits to 4 parts liquid. So, adding a little bit more grits later on, if it's kind of soupy.
So it would be 4 to 1 if you're using, like I was saying before, that some of those grits are actually a pre-cooked product. It's just like when you buy parboiled rice, it's a different ratio of water to rice. So when in doubt, it will tell you, like if you have a box of Quaker grits, it's going to give you that ratio on the back, and they're going to tell you 4 to 1. But if you buy some nice stone ground grits, which I do advise because it really makes a difference, it's going to be 5 to 1. Okay. And the cool thing about grits is that you can't really overcook them. You can scorch them and burn them to the pot, but you can't oversaturate the grits. We're going to try to cook these things all the way. We're going to force as much liquid and flavor into those little kernels of corn as we possibly can. So if your grits are, say they're a little too thin, you can just keep cooking them. And again, the reduction process, the water is going to come out of there and they will thicken up. But if you use that 5 to 1 ratio, you're going to be okay. So my reduction is already up to a boil, and I turned it down just ever so slightly. just so it wouldn't boil over. But going at like a rolling boil is fine. Okay, you're going to cook this down until you have about a cup of liquid left, and then just stop. Now, my stove goes way, way faster than most people's at home, so don't feel like you're getting behind. Trying to do everything just in the right order, okay? And we've done this class a few times before, so I think everybody should be able to make it happen in step with me. So I added my milk to the pot and I turned the flame on. So what we're going to do is just bring that up to a boil. And when it boils, we're going to add the grits to it, stir them in as we're adding them. And the reason for that is when the grits drop in there, just like when anything dry goes into something wet, it's going to want to like clump together, just like flour and water. You know, it's going to want to bond to the other dry things and stay away from the liquid. So we're going to stir it in just to make sure that every little particle of grits is surrounded by our cooking liquid, and then it all cooks evenly. Okay, so that's the reason for doing that. Now you'll notice in the recipe that I have butter added to the grits liquid. Now, under almost any circumstance, I would say continue to do that. There's no reason to not do it, but I've learned to be a little proactive about this because a lot of people ask me at the end of this class, is there any way we can cut some of that butter out of the meal? Because it does actually require like a full pound of butter for this meal. So that's the New Orleans way. That's not just my way. And like I always say, I'm not here to be anybody's cardiologist, but if you are trying to eliminate some butter from this recipe, you can omit it from the grits at this stage, and that's because we're going to add pimento cheese to these grits. Under any other circumstance, do not skip the butter in grits. It's essential. So if you're just making breakfast grits or something like that, absolutely get the butter in there. You could put the butter in now. You could put the butter in at the end. It doesn't really matter. I'm kind of an advocate for putting the butter in the beginning, because that's just more fat in the cooking liquid, and that's ultimately going to make the grit creamier and more delicious. Okay. So while our milk kind of comes up to a boil, which mine isn't that far away, we'll talk a little bit about shrimp. So for the real classic barbecue shrimp dish, like they do over at Pascal's Manali on Napoleon Avenue, it's the shrimp that has the head and the shell and everything still on it. And then they cook it in this sauce with, you know, all the lovely butter and the seasonings like we're doing. And then they just serve it with like a crust of bread. Sorry, I was interrupted by my milk started to boil over.
So is that proof that if that happens to us, we shouldn't freak out?
Yeah, it's just something that happens.
A question from the chat is, should we wait for the liquid to boil before we add the butter?
Before you add the butter, no, it doesn't matter. You could just put the butter in the beginning, or you can put it in at the end. It's really not a big deal. So you can throw that in any time, but the liquid should be at least simmering before you add the grits, okay? Which I've done. So stir the grits in really well. Make sure that they're all separated from each other. And then at this point, what you're going to want to do is turn the flame down a little bit. If you try to cook them too fast, the grits are actually going to scorch to the bottom of the pot before they get cooked. So liquid comes up to a boil, grits go in, stir, 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 and then turn it down. And then just every few minutes, you're going to want to turn around and give those grits a little stir just to make sure they don't scorch, okay? It's going to be watery thin for a while, okay? Don't panic. It's not going to thicken up for at least like a good 10 minutes until the grits start to absorb that liquid. So don't panic if it's not creamy and delicious looking right now. It won't be, all right? So like I was saying about shrimp, the old school barbecue shrimp method is head on, shell on, everything goes in there, and then they build the sauce on top of that. But I think that, you know, digging in to butter sauce and peeling shrimp and all that stuff is probably not the best way to eat this dish. I know that, you know, tradition isn't always right. So what I'm using here, I have these lovely And if you're not in Louisiana, you know, I'm sorry, but we have access to, you know, the best shrimp in the world, which is what I have here. And I'm using a U10 size, which is a pretty big shrimp. But for this, you could buy something a little bit smaller, a little bit cheaper. But I wouldn't go smaller than what they call a 21, 25. And for those of you who don't know, those numbers mean the number of shrimp per pound on the average. So the lower the number, the bigger the shrimp, right? So these are a U10, meaning that for every pound of shrimp, there's about 10 pieces, whereas a 21, 25, obviously 21 to 25. For a barbecue shrimp, I wouldn't really go smaller than a 21, 25. But if you want to use the big guys, that works great for this recipe too. So I go ahead and I peel mine, and I leave just the tail on. Now before, when we were making our reduction, and I mentioned that I put a little shrimp stock in there, that's the reason for that. So the old school method wouldn't call for that because they're actually adding the shrimp shells and everything to that sauce while they make it. So that's where the extra shrimp flavor is coming from. But since we're going to skip that step, I like to add a little shrimp stock to it. It's not a step that's absolutely necessary. That's just kind of like my chef brain telling me that that's something that we should do. So if you don't want to do that, that's fine, but I think it's the right thing to do. So we're going to go ahead and season the shrimp now about 10 minutes before we cook them, and just kind of give the seasoning a chance to bond to the shrimp and become cohesive with that surface. Whenever you cook anything, any kind of meat or whatever, you probably should season it before you cook it, okay? It gives the salt and everything time to actually form a crust and a layer of flavor on your meat. Instead of just throwing it right on there, throw it in the pan or the grill, all your salt and stuff comes off. So I have a little Creole spice. Now I make this stuff myself, and when I make the Creole spice, I don't use salt. So I'm going to add the salt separately. Now it's important to note that if you're using like a store-bought Creole spice, those things are already come fully salted. So if you're using Tony Chachere's or Zatarain's or something like that, you don't have to add any salt. That mixture is already 80% salt. So if you're using Tony's, which is a great product, or whatever, just remember that, okay? And then, of course, like I said before, plenty of fresh black pepper. Mix that up good so everything is coated. We can set that aside and forget about it for a minute. Check on our grits. You'll notice if you turn your back on them for too long, they're going to start to like form that little layer on the bottom. Just make sure you're scraping that off. And if you're forming that layer too quickly, you probably need to turn your heat down even more. Okay? Your grits should be cooking at a nice low simmer. Mine are starting to thicken up just a little bit. So you'll probably notice that I didn't add any salt to the cooking liquid yet. And the reason for that is there's still a lot of cooking to do. So some of that volume is going to come down. The grits are going to absorb liquid. Some of the water is going to cook off. So we want to know what kind of volume we're going to end up with before we start adding salt. You know, if you season it when you have a gallon of something, then if you cook it down to a half a gallon, it's going to be super salty, right? So we're going to wait kind of till the end. We're also going to be adding things to it that already have salt, like cheese. So with grits, you can afford to wait until the very end and just taste it, see if it needs salt, and put it in there, okay? They don't benefit from having salt in there during the cooking process. Not necessary. So the reduction is looking really good. Mine's probably about halfway there. The grits are about halfway there. Our shrimp is seasoned. Is everybody with me so far? Do I need to slow down? Who's cooking along? Feel free to unmute yourself.
I was just wondering, what heat should we have the reduction at on the stove? Like low, medium heat, or?
I would say more like a medium high. You want this thing to be, you know, boiling, because you need to be at the simmer boil point for water to actually cook off, right? So that's what you're trying to achieve right now, is getting rid of some of that water. So boil it off.
Cool.
The reduction is not gonna burn. So yep, just boil it off. Keep your eye on it. Give it a little shake once in a while.
Someone else said they're coming along a little slower because the liquid is not ready for the grits just yet.
Quick question. I'm so sorry, very late to the game here, but for getting the reduction going, is there an order in which we put all the things in, or we just kind of go for it?
Doesn't matter at all. Just dump it all in the pot and put it on the burner.
Got
It's
it.
doing the reductions is
Fine.
very informal.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, so the next thing we're going to get into, and we're going to talk about real quick, is pimento cheese. So pimento cheese is a ubiquitous Southern thing, but I can't really say that it's a New Orleans thing. New Orleans is kind of the eye of the pimento cheese storm in the South. But if you go to cities like Savannah or Little Rock or almost anywhere in northern Mississippi, pimento cheese is a dietary staple, and people eat it in all kinds of different ways. Pimento cheese sandwiches, pimento cheese on crackers, everything from, a lot of chefs have gotten a hold of pimento cheese these days and are doing all kinds of wild stuff with it. Putting it on burgers, just everything. So it's a great ingredient. It's a great thing to have around the fridge, even if it's just a simple snack or something you want to play with at your next cookout. That's cool. So it's a super easy thing to do, and it's adaptable to whatever you like. There's just a few basic ground rules to cover, and then with that, you can be as creative as you want. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm doing this in a stand mixer. It's not absolutely essential. If you don't have one of these, that doesn't mean you can't make pimento cheese. You can still do it by hand. Just get in there and work it, because the first thing and the kind of the glue that holds all this together is cream cheese. So we're going to go ahead and add that to the mixer. Then I have a mixture of mayonnaise and sour cream. Some pimento cheese purists might be strongly against the sour cream thing. I think it adds a nice note, but generally, if you want it to be, totally, strictly legit pimento cheese, it's going to be cream cheese, mayonnaise, sharp cheddar, pimento peppers. Okay, so that's what I have here. We can talk about that real quick.
This is really kind of like a template recipe, right? So not only can you swap out some of the mayo for sour cream, but you can also use other kinds of cheese, not just sharp cheddar.
Yeah,
you can
absolutely.
swap out the pimentos for other things if that's all you can, like if all you can find is roasted red peppers at your supermarket.
Yeah. Super flexible and adaptable to pretty much anything that you like. We had a class a while ago that was from, some of the people in the class were from New Mexico. I use this example a lot because you might know that in New Mexico, they're like fanatical about these green hatch chilies, and roasted green chili goes on everything. There's no reason you couldn't do your pimento cheese with that. Or if you grow some peppers in your garden and you roast them off, you can make it with that. Anything that you like. It doesn't have to say pimento on the jar. Look, pimento is just a word that means pepper. It's just another word for pepper, okay? When you say pimento cheese, it's specifically these little red chilies that are roasted and chopped. They're the ones that go inside your martini outlet, okay? Same thing. But don't stress out if you feel like you're not finding that in the store. That little jar of whatever it is, Del Destino or Roland, or chopped roasted red peppers, and I know every grocery store has those. That'll do. It'll do just fine. So the next thing we're going to put is our seasonings. Now, what's most traditional here is, of course, like garlic powder and onion powder. Some people expand that a little bit, but that's the nuts and bolts of what you need, okay? And then we have, of course, the green stuff, which is green onions. And I'm also using a little bit of parsley. We'll go ahead and put a little fresh garlic in here too. I know the recipe that I wrote has an an adaptation for fresh jalapenos. If you want to spice it up a little bit, then that's your prerogative. Like I said, you can put pretty much any pepper in here that you want. And the same goes for the cheese. Now, cheese is a big world, okay? There's a lot of different kinds of cheese out there. So you have to pretty much, it's going to have to be something that you can mix. You know, if you threw like a big hunk of Parmesan in there or something, it's just going to roll around in the mixer. You could grate it and put Parmesan in there. It actually works pretty well. Like I said before, I'm using a sharp white cheddar, an English cheddar. Also smoked Gouda makes a really good one. And blue cheese makes a really good pimento cheese as well. So don't feel like you're bound by this recipe. I always heavily encourage deviation from recipes. Make your cooking your own because it's your cooking. So we'll add the cheese to this as well. And we're just going to mix this up. So not complicated at all. You just kind of throw everything in there and mix it together. You want to whip it together pretty good, you know, make sure that your cream cheese and your mayonnaise get fully mixed together and all the ingredients come together into a cohesive kind of spread, okay? That's what you're looking for, and that's how the flavors are going to develop, all right? So don't be shy on the mixing. I'll let you guys have kind of a look at this. How that looks. Now, maybe you've seen pimento cheese in the store before. You might notice that some of them are a lot more red or a lot more orange in color. Sometimes that has to do with the amount of paprika in the seasoning or the kind of cheese that you use, obviously. If I use like a deep, rich yellow cheddar, that's going to change the color of my pimento cheese, but it's not one of those things where the color is most crucial, okay? About the flavors of what you want to use. So I don't know if you guys can see that okay on my camera, but I've been teaching this class a lot lately, so I think my refrigerator at home probably has like 6 separate containers of pimento cheese in it. So that's why I'm making a slightly smaller batch than what the recipe I included for you guys has, because I can only eat so much pimento cheese. But I should tell you, if you're following the recipe that I gave you, there's purposely more pimento cheese there than you need. So you're only gonna need about half of what that recipe makes for the grit. And then the rest of it, you can just hold on to and see how you can work pimento cheese and other things in your cooking. I recommend doing some grilled cheese sandwiches or trying it on a burger. Those are some of my favorite ways to use it. But it's also a good snack, you know, a cheese spread is always welcome, okay? So, like I always say, that's kind of my gift to the people that take this class, is that they get to make unexpectedly more pimento cheese than they need. So my grits are actually getting pretty close. So like I said, don't feel bad if yours isn't. I have a lot of BTUs then. So what I'm gonna do is, now that my grits are actually cooked, and I'm gonna go ahead and show you that they're like almost clinging to the whisk, okay? Creamy, kind of fluffy.
How are we all doing at home? Kara, how's your reduction coming? Rebecca, how are you catching up? Everyone feeling okay? Avi, are your grits in yet?
We're good. We're making the sauce. It's going to be amazing.
I think it looks good. I don't really know, but it looks kind of dark, but he said I can't burn it. So I don't even know if you can see it.
Oh yeah, show us.
The reduction is going to be very dark. It's going to be like a very.
It smells good.
It's going to be like espresso color when you're done. So don't worry about that. Once we add all the butter to it in the recipe, it's going to turn into this kind of rich mahogany color, and you'll see it's all going to work out. So I went ahead and scooped some pimento cheese into my grits, and I'm just going to stir it in. It's going to melt in there really fast. So that's it. My grits are ready for meal service now. I'm just going to set them aside. Maybe you could put something on top of the pot and cover it and just keep them hot.
And you're not keeping them on heat, right? You're taking them off the heat. You're just covering them.
Definitely off the heat. You can just cover them up. You don't want to keep cooking them. They're done. Just keep them warm. They're ready to go. Okay.
For those of you
Reduction.
at home who've never worked in a restaurant kitchen, this is just a little glimpse. Most home cooks have lids for their pots that match. Most professional cooks do not. So this is a glimpse.
Absolutely not. No.
If you don't have a proper lid for your pot, it doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. It might just mean that you are cooking like a chef.
Yep.
And if
Even
y'all
at-
are not
even at home,
putting pimento cheese in your
just use
grits,
plates.
it's also fine if you keep them set aside. That's why they're choose your own adventure grits. That reduction
So-
cooked down a lot.
Yeah. Mine even cooked even a little too far, but the cool thing about reductions is that all we've really done here is extract flavor and remove one. So if we feel like we need more, we can just add a little bit of water to this. So the thing is, when we cook the shrimp, we're going to add this reduction to the hot pan again, so it's gonna sizzle and reduce even more. So I actually am going to add like a quarter cup of water to this just to give me a little breathing room. Okay. That'll all make sense here in a second. But if you guys can see on my camera, you see what the reduction looks like. Like I said, it's like espresso colored, like almost black. And then what you have left behind in the pot here is just the rest of that stuff, okay? That's what we call in the business trash, right? So you get rid of that stuff. You don't need that. Now, you can do this reduction like way ahead of time. Restaurants down here do the same thing. We make huge batches of this stuff, and then we can just make barbecue shrimp to the order all night long. So, if you're having yourself a little dinner party or something like that, go ahead and make your reduction in advance. It's only going to get better. The stuff will keep for at least a week in the fridge. And if you don't use shrimp stock, it'll keep almost forever. So feel free to do that in advance. That's actually like the secret to cooking like a chef is preparing things in advance. So we're not trying to do everything all at once. Okay, that's really the secret to good cooking. That's all it is. Just be prepared. So last thing we're gonna do, I have a nice large skillet here. Okay, because we're trying to sear shrimp. So the trick to that is you want to give the shrimp enough space in the pan. Okay, when you're searing something, you can't crowd the pan too much, especially something like shrimp or mushrooms that has a lot of moisture inside of it. If you cook shrimp too slowly, all that's going to happen is you're just going to siphon all the moisture out of the shrimp. And everybody knows what overcooked shrimp looks like, right? It shrinks down to like 1/10 of its size, and it's not very pleasant to eat. So what we're going to try to do is get the cooking process done fast. This is why things like shrimp and seafood in general, that's why it fries really well, because any cooking method where you get in and get out quickly as you can, cook shrimp as quick as you can and be done with it. You don't want to sit there and cook it for hours. Okay, it's not a roast. You're not gonna pull it and make barbecue out of it or something. You want to get it done quickly. All right. So we're gonna go ahead and get the pan nice and hot. We're gonna add just a touch of oil to it. And the reason why just a touch is because too much oil and it's going to ruin our sauce. So I have here about a tablespoon of canola oil. Still waiting for the pan to get hot a little bit. Anybody got any questions out there for me while we're waiting? Thought I heard somebody. All right, so the pan's like smoking hot. Put our oil in there. Get the shrimp down. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but that's essential. You should definitely, whenever you're sauteing or searing anything, something should something should happen when you put it in the pan, right? You should get.
Show us what the pan looks like so we can get a sense of how it shouldn't be crowded. That's a good amount of space between them.
Yeah, honestly, for this pan, it's pretty large, so I could fit 3 or 4 more pieces of shrimp in there, but you do want to get, you want them to have some space. Don't dump like a whole bowl of shrimp in a tiny pan and start sauteing it, At a bare minimum, every shrimp should be in direct contact with the pan. Not so much shrimp in there that they're like bunched up. Because all that's going to happen is, again, the water's going to leach out. You're going to steam your shrimp, and it's not going to be successful. It's not what we're looking for. So you'll find if you get a really nice little sear on that shrimp, it's going to be so much more enjoyable to eat. You can add that little crunch on the outside, a much better flavor. So they're only going to take about maybe a minute.
What's a good way to tell that your shrimp is done cooking?
Well, obviously they're going to kind of change color. They're going to curl up. But also, if your pan is hot like it should be and you can hear your shrimp sizzling, they're not going to take long to cook. 90% of the cooking is kind of done on one side. So you turn them over, you see they've got some color on them. Seasonings are still stuck to it. So what we're going to do is the pan is still nice and hot, right? So we're going to turn the heat way down. And this is where it gets it's kind of like the moment of truth, okay? So we're going to take our reduction.
Before you get going on that, someone asked, when do I know when my grits are done? Not sure if I need to cook off more liquid or not.
Okay, I will get to that in just a second. This is a crucial point that we're at here. So, pan, we're going to take our reduction, add this to the pan. You're going to immediately get a lot of bubbling. It's going to try to reduce more. Don't let it cook down all the way dry, okay? And then you're going to add butter to this, okay? I got my butter cut in little cubes like this. The butter is cold. Add it to the pan. And you got to keep this moving around, okay? Just a touch more. You got to keep this moving around while you cook it and keep it on a low flame, okay? You're just trying to maintain a temperature here, all right? What we're doing is called emulsification. Now, when you get to the point where your little pats of butter are almost completely melted, turn the heat off. But don't stop moving the pan around, okay?
Sorry, did you put the reduction in the shrimp or the grip?
I put the reduction, so I seared the shrimp, and as soon as I flipped the shrimp over, I added the reduction to the pan, turned the heat way down and threw the butter in and started stirring and moving it around, okay? And then when the butter's almost melted in, just turn the heat off.
Perfect.
So what you're gonna see here is that like you have a rich sauce that's all together. You don't see like streaks of fat in it, okay? It's a nice brown sauce. That means that your butter has actually emulsified. Now, if you see a bunch of like clear fat from the butter and also brown stuff from the reduction, that means your sauce is what they call broken, okay? So emulsification is what brings us, actually butter itself is an emulsification, okay? Other emulsifications Caesar salad dressing, mayonnaise, hollandaise sauce, okay? Basically what emulsion is getting oil and water to be together, which as the old saying goes, you know, that it's like oil and water because they naturally want to repel each other. So you're trying to get them to actually bond together, and that's what an emulsion is. So that takes a little bit of work. Now, what's helping us here is two things. It's acid, which comes from the lemon juice and the Worcestershire in our reduction, and it's also movement. Okay, all emulsification needs some kind of movement. Even if you're making mayonnaise in a food processor or a blender, or you know, stirring a butter sauce together, it's all about motion. It takes acid and motion, and then of course oil and water. So I know we're not trying to do a science class right now, but that's really what that's about. All right, so you can see my sauce. The point of it is that this is going to stick to the shrimp. You know, it's great for dipping bread in and stuff like that. If your sauce breaks, sometimes there's things you can do. Okay, if it breaks, stop cooking it. It's possibly too hot. All right, and then what you would do. So if one of these broke on me in the pan, the best thing you can do is take a little bit of heavy cream and add that and shake the pan back up and stir it. 9 times out of 10, it'll come back to life for you. Okay. If that doesn't work, you might be too far gone and you might just have to eat the shrimp the way it is. I know it's not super forgiving, but butter sauces are notoriously not forgiving. There's a vein of.
The sauce is not super forgiving. What is your #1 tip for folks who haven't done this before to help ensure that they're doing it right?
Well, I would say it's the amount of reduction to the amount of butter. Okay, so it takes very little reduction. So it actually only takes a tablespoon of water to emulsify a pound of butter. Now that's the maximum, but for this, you know, you want to make sure you don't, if you have too much reduction, sorry, you can emulsify the butter into it, but you're going to have a thin sauce. So if your sauce comes together, it's a good color, but you find it's just a little too thin and it's not a nappe. Now, if you look at my cutting board camera real quick, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So what we call nappe in cooking is basically when it's on a spoon and you can do this, that's called a nappe, okay? And that's a term for the consistency of a sauce. So
can you show us
the
the
reason,
nappe one more time for folks who might not have seen it?
sure. On the back of a spoon, draw a line. See how the line stays there? So
That was always the weirdest cue for me, like as a home cook, before someone really taught it to me. I would read recipes and it's like, you know, cook this until it coats the back of a spoon. And it's always hard to like really know what that means, because obviously if you stick a spoon in the sauce, even if it's not thick, it will cover the back of the spoon.
right, yeah, it's all about being able to draw the line, and it's really what it is. And sometimes cookbooks fail to mention things like that. But the reason that we're looking for that consistency is because we want the sauce to coat what we're cooking it. You know, we want it to coat the shrimp. It's not going to be the end of days if you don't get there. Like, you're still going to have a delicious, albeit kind of greasy, fatty barbecue shrimp. You can still eat it if the butter sauce doesn't work out, but they take a little bit of practice. You know, butter sauces, they're temperamental. They require certain things. You know, you can't get them too hot. You can't let them get too cold. You know, you need your reduction to be at a certain level. You need your butter to be at a certain temperature. But I would say hot reduction, cold butter, and once you start cooking it, keep the motion going, keep stirring it, keep shaking the pan. That's how you're going to get there. If you just let the butter sit there and melt, it's not going to do anything. So it requires, you know, it's the oil and water, and it's like a bad relationship. You know, they need to have friction and like a really bad fight before they can, you know, make up and come together again or whatever. So
Here's a
That's
question.
my bit on emulsion. Okay, it's kind of like makeup thing.
Here's a question from the chat. Is there a way to thicken up the butter sauce if there was too much liquid left in the reduction? Like if the reduction was not super reduced, is there a way to still kind of get the final sauce that luxurious texture?
Well, yeah. So you can keep adding more butter to it, you know. But the thing is, how much sauce do you really want to make? But yeah, if it's not thickening enough, but it's together, you can just try adding more butter to it. The more butter you add to a butter sauce and emulsify, the thicker it's going to get up until the point that it breaks. And then once that happens, it's hard to come back from it. But yeah, if it's too thin, it could be too much liquid to begin with, or you could try adding a little more butter to it. Or just make sure that you have plenty of like a nice baguette or a French bread on hand to eat with it. That's probably the best recommendation. If your sauce is together and it's just a little too thin, then eat it and enjoy it. And then the next time, remember to reduce your reduction a little bit more. That would be my tip. So I'm gonna add to this pan just a little bit of, I have some chopped parsley and green onion here. Just kind of doll this up a little bit.
How are you all doing at home? Rebecca, you look like you're having fun.
Yeah, Rebecca's doing everything.
Sarah's doing all of it? How do we all get a Sarah? I would like a Sarah in my life.
My grits here are kind of like kind of a loose mashed potato consistency. They can be a little bit thinner than that, but you don't want them to be like, you know, I know it's sacrilegious to say anything bad about them to some people, but like Waffle House, it's kind of always stuck in my craw about their grits. They serve them in a fashion that a lot of people do, but they're very thin. Some people do the thinner, more watery grits, and I'm not here to say that it's wrong, but for this dish, we want them to be a little bit more creamy, fluffy, a little bit more like mashed potatoes than like some kind of porridge, you know?
Someone said she's
put
already
some of that.
eating hot sauce. That sounds great. Rhea, do you have pimento in your grits? You're eating the pimento cheese grits with hot sauce, or you're just doing the straight up grits?
Oh no, with the cheese.
Perfect. Yum.
Put all of our shrimp right on top of there. Give our sauce kind of a final shake. And then if you guys are looking at my cutting board camera, don't be shy with the sauce, really as much as the dish will hold, okay? I'd say if it's possible to commit a real sin with New Orleans style barbecue shrimp, it would be to not make enough sauce. This dish is so much more about the sauce than anything else. The shrimp is really just, you know, and I think like going back to what we talked about with using the whole shrimp in the sauce, I think the shrimp was really just like used to flavor the sauce that people just eat with bread and everything else at the table. So the shrimp is almost an afterthought in this dish. It's really about the sauce. So if there is a cardinal sin, it's not making enough sauce. Make sure that there's plenty. This whole dish is like drowning in sauce, right? That's coming up over the lip of the bowl. But it's a very New Orleans dish, and that's a very New Orleans kind of approach to it. If it seems wrong, add more butter and make sure that there's plenty for everybody. So other than that,
add more butter just seems like good life advice.
For some people, yeah.
For some people. This is definitely a kind of recipe that you make, you make it when you're in the mood to celebrate with people. Because I'm guessing that most people don't eat 4 sticks of butter in most of their weeknight cooking. This is more of a fun and special occasion indulgence. And I'm here to say, I mean, this is plated in a big bowl so that it's really pretty, for visual effect. That's much more than a real serving size.
Absolutely.
It's a great thing to share with people because it just feels really special. A lot of New Orleans cooking, y'all probably know, having gone to Tulane, a lot of it is, like you think about like fried shrimp po' boys or roast beef debris, things that like take longer or they take more, special equipment, like being able to deep fry. But this is something that you can make and just be able to have New Orleans in your kitchen in an hour.
Yeah. And if you're doing, if you're doing a potluck or a dinner party or something like that, there's nothing wrong with just leaving the grits out and just do a big bowl of this with a bunch of really good crusty bread. And that's going to make your guests happy, guaranteed. Now, if you're looking at this is more of an entree approach to this dish. And, shrimp and grits obviously is a really hot combination these days that it goes back. But sometimes people ask me, and not as much as you would think, but sometimes people ask me what a vegetable to go with this would be. And I always recommend like stewed collard greens or something like that. But what I had today was some stewed green beans. And I figured with our last couple minutes here, I would talk about green beans. And a lot of times you get, in restaurants, they do haricot vert, which is like this blanched green bean. And then, it's still kind of squeaky and has a nice texture. And then they saute it with butter and shallots and stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think people get really fussy about green beans. And there's nothing wrong with just taking some big old green beans and stewing them down with some tomato or even some bacon if you're into that, and just cook them, like really cook them until they're, all the way cooked down like this, nice and soft and flavorful. Some of that would go great on this dish, or whatever your favorite roasted vegetables are, or no vegetables. But I figured I would just cover that in case anybody was interested.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
So I'm a little behind some of my reductions going, but I'm realizing it would be like way too much. So I'm going to do less of the reduction. So I'll probably do like a half a cup of the reduction. So then would you add a half a stick of butter, or like what's the ratio?
I would say for a half a cup of reduction, you're probably closer to a stick and a half than a half a stick.
Well, I just boiled the milk. Sorry. The milk just boiled over behind me. This is good.
Oh yeah, it just happened to me a few minutes ago. So yeah, don't worry about that.
Okay, so wait, half a cup of reduction, a stick and a half of butter.
I'd say that ratio is probably closer to a half a stick. So I mean, butter sauces are they're called butter sauces for a reason because they're mostly butter. Your reduction is just what is kind of keeping it all together.
Okay.
So it's almost like half and half, if not more butter than liquid.
Excellent. Thank you. Did you guys like the dramatic pot bubbling over behind me as I was talking?
It happened to me too.
Jacob's got the idea. Just butter, 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 butter. Cool. How are we all doing? Rhea, did you make grits or did you make shrimp also, or were you just sticking with the grits and the hot sauce?
I did not because I don't eat seafood, but it was beautiful to watch. And maybe I'll try this with like tofu or something.
Yeah, we did do a class where we did tofu for this.
Oh, Carrie, you made it with chicken.
Yeah, I love shrimp, but the closest grocery store to me is the Giant, and I was like, I'm not buying shrimp there, and I didn't really want to go to Whole Foods, so I just used this chicken. It like looks gross, but I think it's gonna be delicious. I also did couscous. I didn't do grits, which is like sacrilegious, but I knew I was gonna fuck it up, so this time I decided to do couscous instead.
There you go.
It looks
Yeah,
great.
chicken is a totally acceptable stand-in with this dish. Yeah, this sauce goes good with really just about anything. So yeah, if you want to do chicken, or it's actually a really good steak sauce. It's not really that far off of like a steak Diane or something like that, flavor-wise. So yeah, you can adapt this sauce to just about anything. I think a New Orleans barbecued steak would be really cool, actually. Take this kind of method, but do like a ribeye or something like that. That'd be really, really delicious, I think.
And for Ria or anyone else who's interested, Ria, I'm sorry also if I'm not pronouncing your name right. But for anyone else who isn't making it with shrimp and who's using tofu or something else, the cooking is really pretty much the same thing, where you would, you'd take the sliced meat or the sliced tofu, give it some time to season, and then same deal when you're searing it, you want to make sure it's not crowded in the pan. That's really important. But otherwise, it's pretty much an easy thing to kind of drop in. And you could even try, with something, with something else like shiitake mushrooms, or possibly even with cauliflower, I think could be really good. Small enough that it won't be raw in the middle. But
or all three of those things together sound great, actually, like seared tofu and some cauliflower florets and some roasted shiitake mushrooms.
Yeah.
Prepared in this way actually sounds really great.
You're not going to add protein to your meal, but that's why, that's why you have all that cheese in your grits. Mushrooms, I feel like, are a really good substitute for shrimp because they have that same sort of texture of like the kind of firmness. So it works really nicely. But also just regular cheese grits with hot sauce is that is a great dinner.
And then the final thing I want to tell you guys about is that if you have a little casserole dish or a small pan or something like that, take your leftover grits and smooth it out on there and throw them in the fridge. And then the next day, they'll harden up and you can cut them into little squares and fry them. And we call those grit cakes. But those are really awesome brunch items, is grit cakes. Or you can even make this same sauce and do it with grit cakes instead of creamy grits. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. So, like I said, I heavily encourage deviation from my recipes. I deviate from my recipes all the time. So, yeah, definitely make it your own. There's lots of variations to this meal.
Thank you guys so much. Do y'all want to do, no pressure, but I don't know if y'all want to do a group picture. I know that most of us are probably ready to go out and eat our dinner, but if you would like to be in a group picture, feel free to turn on your video and we can do a little group screenshot.
I would love to see what everybody's got.
Yeah, that's true. If you've been cooking along, let's take this picture and then you can show Chef Scott what you've got. Oh yeah, or pose with it. Amazing. Oh, Jacob's posing with an empty bowl. So is Ria.
It's a lot of pimento cheese.
What'd you say?
A lot of pimento cheese.
Oh, I didn't even see that. And you're like, oh, that's your cheese. Incredible. Okay, cool. I'm gonna take this picture. We have some folks just with names, but if you want, turn your video on. And we're gonna take a couple. 1, 2, 3. Hang on. 1, 2. Hang on. Sorry, my computer's being weird. Of course it is. It always does this.
Jalen, your cat is just chilling.
What's up, Ria?
Hey.
She's very sweet.
Cute cat, Jalen.
Thanks, Jacob. We still rocking the hairstyle, man. We're killing it.
Okay, let's try this again. 1, 2, 3. Awesome, we got it. Thanks for your patience, y'all. Feel free to show us what you got while we're all here. I'm gonna put it back on speaker view. And if you made your food and you wanna show Chef Scott fire away. And oh, we've got people making connections in the chat box. Hip hop dance class together. I wish I had a hip hop dance class when I was in college. I did take a West African dance class. That was kind of fun.
I will tell you, you're gonna have to find somebody else to teach that. I don't think I'm in for the hip hop dance class. You guys aren't gonna want me to teach that.
Our West African dance professor's motto was "Free your pelvis, free your mind." So that was words to live by, you know? I think that everyone's got some really hot, delicious, cheesy grits and shrimp. So we're gonna wrap this up, but y'all will be getting a link to this recording from, I believe, Max or Jacob. And thank you to Max and Jacob for the opportunity for us to host y'all tonight. We teach these classes regularly to the public. If y'all are interested, I'll drop the link in the chat. The next one we have will be next Thursday, and we are doing a menu inspired by Say Anything, which is part of our rooftop movie series that we do here. But we teach these classes every week if you want to come catch Chef Scott again for another good menu. And we are just so grateful that we got to host y'all, and we hope to see y'all at NOCHI or on the internet sometime soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank
I
you.
hope you enjoyed it. I did.
Thank you so
Thank y'all
much.
so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
See some of y'all.